Hello, everyone. Welcome to eTalks. I'm Ezra, and today we have our guest speaker, Terry. Terry is our guest speaker who has pursued art since 1994, which is a lot older than I am, making a living through gallery shows, illustrating a children's book, and of course, running an architectural illustration business. In 2012, he made a quick transition to teaching math. And through that experience, he found similarities between teaching and his artistic endeavors of painting. Throughout his career, however, he's jumped from different jobs, applying his artistic abilities in all of them, which includes a U.S. Marine, a bank loan officer, an EMT, and a teacher. Terry has consistently integrated this invaluable lessons learned from his artistic journey. And I hope we learn how you did that more, and also explore a little bit more of your experiences and how that applies to our daily lives. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. I believe we can start off first with a little bit more from what you want to teach us today, and then we can explore different questions and all that.
Sure, Ezra. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It's really cool to get to talk about art. That's something that doesn't happen every day for me. So I treasure this opportunity to be with you. So I want to start by saying that the advertised title of this presentation was how you can exercise an artist's mindset in your everyday life. But right off the top, I kind of like to change that if I could. I want to, okay, good. I want to make it a little bit more inclusive. I want to say, I want to title this talk, How Anyone Can Exercise an Artist's Mindset in Their Everyday Life. And the reason I want that to be a little more inclusive is because, I know eTalks mission statement is that, art can have, can save the world and have some really positive impacts. And so, it's my feeling that, art, there's a whole lot more of us who aren't necessarily good at art than there are people who have like the manual dexterity and the innate ability. And so I actually prepared this talk for those people. So when we're just because we're
Perfect.
yeah
Because I love art, but you tell me to draw something, I'm like, stick figure okay? Or
right. And I should point out that like the things I talk about today are from the perspective of a visual artist. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't want people to check out just because right off the bat you say, oh, I like to listen to e-talks, but they've got an artist on this week.
Yeah.
Um, and I truly believe that anyone out there who's interested in it can develop an artistic mindset, and I think it's valuable to kind of take that with us out of the studio into everyday life. And so Ezra, I also did a little bit of looking into data. I'm not a huge data guy, but I think another part of the reason that we need to concentrate on educating people who aren't, highly skilled at producing visual art, I think that another reason we need to kind of bring them into this is because I think that artists are a bit limited in the impact that maybe they can have. I know that when I started painting, I thought, boy, there's a lot of people who are going to see my work, and this is going to be super impactful. But that may not be as much the case as we might think. I went and got a little bit of data, and here's what I learned. Okay. I didn't know that 70% of Americans will never, in their lifetime, purchase an original art piece. 70%.
So like that can include like, because for example, there's like, like farmers market or like themed open markets, right? Where they'll have artists. You're including that, right? Including those
Right.
like made. Wow,
Yeah,
70%.
70%. We're not talking about going to an upscale gallery and like and actually like purchasing you know.
Right, like a
Well,
2,000, 3,000, four
right,
$60,000 painting. Yeah, because
right.
that's what I'm thinking. But you're talking about like literally handmade like piece of art.
An original piece of artwork. And you know,
Wow.
it's a little bit of an assumption for me to say that that doesn't that includes everything, but I kind of think it does, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So here's another kind of statistic that stood out to me. Only 1 in 4 Americans will visit a museum of any type this year.
One
And
in four.
one in
I'm not a
four.
math person. That's 25%, right?
Yeah, right, right. So I rounded that a little bit. The actual figure was 28%, right? But it's really, really close to 25%. And you know what got me was I was kind of searching, you know, how many people go to art, you know, stuff. And this statistic came up that 1 in 4 will visit a museum. And when it said that's a museum of any type, that would
Mhm.
include like a wax museum or like maybe Ripley's Believe It or Not. Like you're
Yeah,
not
yeah. Like
going
the
to that kind of
entertainment
place.
ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Right. You're not going there to look for art. You're just going to a museum and they count all of those people. And then here's the final statistic that kind of got my attention. Um, the 2 largest art markets, and I'm not talking dollars spent, you know, dollars spent, we're talking about New York, San Francisco, but
Yeah.
the 2 largest art markets in America per capita that sell like the most art per capita per person sell, this shocked me, sell annually, they sell about 133 pieces of art per 100,000 people. So the ratio is 133 to 100,000. So
Oh my,
it's,
it's like almost like if someone gave me those odds, I'd be like, I won't take it. Like that's so
yeah,
low.
right, right. You
Oh my
know,
God.
that's a whole different conversation about how, you know, artists really, really need to not really need to do this because they get value out of it for themselves, like intrinsic value, and we need to do it because it's who we are and enjoy the process and all that other stuff. But here's how this kind of ties into my presentation. I was thinking about these numbers and I thought, like, look, if e-talks is going to change the world, like through art, we've kind of got to realize that, you know, hanging pictures on the walls of museums and galleries probably is not going to get it done, right? There's
Yeah.
the regular public, it just isn't that you know, exposed to it. So
Yeah.
that's, you know, a long explanation of why I wanted to retitle this presentation, like, well, how anybody can kind of develop an artist mindset and take it out there. Because let's not rely on artists to do this. Let's all try to just think like artists and let's have our impacts. And here's the last thing I'll say. Having been an artist for a while, um, you know how many, Ezra, do you know how many people I see in my studio on an average day? How many people I have a chance to impact in my studio on an average day?
Like that just to come.
Just
Maybe well, now you gave me the statistics. I don't feel as hopeful. I'm gonna say 2 to 3 on average.
is zero,
Zero?
right? Yeah. Because right, I'm busy painting and like, you know, and probably most artists, they don't want to be disturbed, right? They're painting, they're
Right.
working. So like artists have a really small, you know, right? And so here's the deal. What if a salesman is conversant in the arts and uses what he or she knows about beauty and is and seeks to uh, inject that into their lives and in their being and share that with their clients? That's the guy who's going to reach a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Probably not me. It's that guy. It's that guy. So I think there's a lot of value in people who don't consider themselves to be artists, learning a little bit about how we think, and then saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, that might be something that's pretty cool. I might want to try out there in my
Yeah.
job or my relationships or even in my home." Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 100%. It's like a interchangeable skill almost, like to get I mean, we say artistic, but I feel like it's also just that creative potential, that creative like tap that for some reason we've like fully closed, and now like we're like slowly
Hmm.
turning the faucet so that it's just it flows,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Or maybe we think we don't have permission in our everyday lives or in our work to be creative, and so we maybe don't think of doing that. And
yeah,
maybe, like you said, we can kind of turn the tap and maybe get thinking people thinking in different ways and think, hey, there's there's some opportunity here for me. I recognize because I know maybe this thing that I learned from reading this art book or something, right?
yeah, exactly. Um, well, I know you do have a presentation to start, that you want to show us. I'm interested to see it. If you wanna, you can start, and I already have like 500,000 questions that I want to ask you, so I will definitely interrupt at some point, but I would love to see what you prepared for us today.
Oh, actually, you know what, Ezra? I when I said I had a presentation, what I meant was I just kind of had prepared about
Oh,
15,
that's okay.
15 minutes of dialogue. I don't have a like a really slick
No,
presentation.
that's fine because I was
So,
actually enjoying this too.
yeah.
Well, now that
Well,
we're
I'll tell you
talking,
what though.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I'll tell you what though. I'm not a huge social media guy, but if your listeners or your colleagues would like a chance to see some of my work,
Yes,
I put a little bit on Instagram now and
yes.
then, and so there's a little bit there they can take a look. It's Terry underscore Norcross. So that's something that people, if they want to see like a little
Okay,
kind of thing,
perfect,
that's it.
perfect,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect. Okay. Well, now that we're talking about kind of exploring art and integrating art in different skills, I think one of the first thing is like, how did you incorporate that discipline that you learned from art? Because, art is fun. Being an artist is fun because you get to create, right? But you also need a discipline for it. You need to be able to, I think in my mind, like have a set day in your time where you're just focusing on your art, right?
Mm.
Whether that's developing it or whether that's continuing the creation that you began. So how do you incorporate that discipline that I am assuming that you've learned from your artistic experience? And if you haven't, please let me know. Um, how do you apply that to like literally any other aspect of your life?
That's a really great question. I have I have decided now, like I said, I'm a visual artist, and please don't judge me for uh my own original thoughts here, but I've decided that for me, art's about a pursuit of beauty. And so one of the things that I that is valuable for me is to acquaint myself with the attributes of beauty. And once I'm aware of these types of things, I start to notice them, and I start to uh, recognize the value in them, and I start to try to incorporate them in my life. Once that happens, and it's a really intentional kind of process. Number one, but like I said, something anybody can do. But number one, um, going out there and actually kind of figuring out what is beautiful, and then saying, I'm going to be intentional about that, taking that out there with me. And then it's just a matter of maybe trying to remember it, or being in a situation and saying, wow, I kind of sense that there's this kind of disharmony here,
Mhm.
not a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
how I know that harmony is a really important part of a beautiful thing. So I recognize there's a lack of that right now. Let me see what I can do about just, number one, being aware is a big deal, but how I can maybe uh, uh, interject some harmony into the situation, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
so
love
I think
that.
that's,
Like I wrote down art, and then pursuit of beauty, like art is equals pursuit of beauty, because that I resonate with, like I really connect with that on a deep level, because I think beauty is also something that you personally find beautiful, right? Like just like you said, like finding that beauty out there is going to take some, trial and error and some challenges and a little bit of self-reflection of yourself because you naturally wonder, like, why do I find that beautiful, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Um but then finding that harmony between that pursuit is like, I think, like the key that I was trying to like find in how to explain how art influences our daily lives, right? So that
Huh.
harmony piece, I think, is like totally valuable.
And you know what's really cool is once we all start to learn about it, it would be really nice if we can all, I would encourage everyone who's watching this to try to move beyond the uh, the superficial when it comes to seeking out beauty and kind of recognizing it. And by superficial, I mean, what happens if you really do see something you like? You see a beautiful painting or something, and maybe you get asked, but what do you like so much about that?
Yeah.
And you go, I don't know, it's just, I
I just
like it.
like it. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. So I would encourage everybody to try to move maybe a step beyond that and begin to think about the things uh, that are resonating with you about that particular piece. And once you begin to do this, it's really going to be cool that first time you experience maybe a sunset. You're walking with a friend, and you look at the sunset, and everybody knows that's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to be really cool the first time you're able to say, wow, look at that, that's beautiful, do you notice this? Or I
Yeah.
like, look at what's happening there, look at those complementary colors, or look at that variety of edges, and like look at the clouds as in contrast to the sharp,
Yeah.
and when you can do that, that just enhances the enjoyment of that scene. And
Mhm. Do you feel like people
it's a wonderful feeling.
I
and
agree.
and,
I
and then the
think I
first
think when you find Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was going to say, and then, and then the first time you see something that somebody else has like painted in a museum, okay, you go to the museum. Number one, you got to be one of the people that goes to the museum. You go to the museum and you see this beautiful painting, and then you say, "Wow, look at what they've done! Look at
Mhm.
that!" And you begin to, and then you feel really smart. You're like, "Wow,
Yeah.
I know about art now. This just really and then so anyway, that's my thing. I think everybody should maybe it would be really nice if people realize the value in that and what it adds to your life and your enjoyment of things, like everything.
I 100% agree. I mean, what you just said kind of resonated with Immanuel Kant, the philosopher. I kept saying Kant, like Kant. He said that he philosophized multiple things about art, but his main thing, from what I understood from my philosophy class a few years ago, is that art is anything that makes you feel a relevant and driving emotion, right? It's that light, that fire that comes kind of, I don't know, I feel it a lot when I'm witnessing something beautiful in front of me. It's like a sense of like, I just want to be in it now. Like I want to dive into it and just find out more about it. But I'm curious to kind of ask you, like, how, in order for us to dig deeper, right, in that art, and to really ask ourselves why we like this thing, or why does it influence us in that way, do you think that people are afraid to do that because it's like a vulnerability piece with ourselves? I mean, what do you think is like the block that blocks everyday people from asking those deeper questions, asking, like, if I say I like this color, why? Well, I like this color, why?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
continuously
Yeah.
asking that why question. Is there a reason why people, I mean, I have an answer for it, but I would love to hear your answer for it. Why
Yeah, for
people
sure.
would kind of block themselves from that.
Yeah, right, right. Well, I think most of us who don't paint feel a little bit intimidated by art a lot of the times, you know, and I think it's really sad. I walked out of a museum recently with my son. My wife and I were visiting out of town, and we went to this museum, and my son commented when he left the museum, he goes, "Well, I guess I just don't understand art. Just don't understand it." Because in this museum, a lot of the stuff was so esoteric and just like, you know, and you know,
Very, very
people,
contemporary, very, very abstract. Yeah.
and I think people don't understand that. You know, they sometimes have difficulty locating the beauty in some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, here's a shocker, right? Some artists aren't out there to create beauty, right? So
They want to
anyway,
disrupt beauty, actually. That's the,
right, right, you
yeah.
know. So so you know, I think in general, if I'm not an artist, I'm really afraid to you know, someone an author back in the 19th century wrote beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Hmm.
And so we are afraid to say that's not beautiful or that doesn't resonate with me. We just feel belittled by what we see and not and maybe intimidated. And so that's really sad. I think people should walk out of museums inspired, in awe of what they saw, really something really, really beautiful. So I think sometimes, you know, I think sometimes we miss the mark.
Yeah.
And so people, it's kind of like a moving target, and like someone who doesn't paint or draw or sing, they might not know how to interpret these things, and they don't want to miss it, and so they just maybe they don't have the confidence.
Yeah.
In my opinion, most people probably are a lot better at this than they think. We can recognize beauty whether we know anything about art or not. So this actually dovetails really well into some of the things I was thinking about for this presentation, Ezra. I actually prepared some artistic attributes that
Yes. Okay.
I would like to play a little game with you now, if that would be okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's pretend like none of us know anything about art. We're just that guy who says, "Yeah, I want to try to develop an artistic mindset. How do I do that?"
Mhm.
Well, here's what you do. You give yourself credit for what you already know. Here's how the game works, Ezra.
Okay.
I'm going to read some words, just single words that I have put down. Some of them are attributes of beauty, some of them are not.
Okay.
And I'll read all the words, and then you and I can go through them afterwards, and we can say, that would be something I would want to look for in a piece of art, or that's something I'd want to recognize in life to, you know, enrich my experience. Okay, ready?
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So I'll just read through the words and we'll talk about them. First word is harmony.
Okay.
Second word is unity,
Mhm.
discord,
Mhm.
contrast, repetition, simple, complicated, rhythm, variety, unique, and symmetry. Okay.
Okay.
So let's and let's go back to so you can give me a thumbs up. That's a beautiful thing. I want to look for that. I want to seek that. Or okay. So harmony. Yeah. Good. Unity. Discord.
What can you explain what Discord is? Because I know this is embarrassing, but the only Discord I know is the app that we use. What can you explain what Discord is briefly?
Discord would mean a group of elements that don't agree with each other, that are going all in different ways and don't have any kind of group
Oh,
unity.
okay. I would like
Okay.
to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Contrast.
Mhm.
Yeah. Repetition. Simple. Complicated. Rhythm. Esoteric. In other words, only a few people understand it.
Yeah.
Variety.
I might not understand them, but variety, yeah.
Okay. Variety's good. Unique.
Yeah.
Yeah. Symmetry. Nice, nice. Okay, here's the good news, Ezra. You got 100%, because
Yay.
there's no wrong answers. Okay, we don't need to
Mhm.
be hard and fast about these rules, but I think it's important that we all kind of think about them and come up with things that, you know, here's the deal. Make your own list. I would encourage,
Yeah.
everyone to kind of make your own list. And once you make your own list, you're going to start being more aware of those things. And what does it mean to have discord? What is it, contrast? What does that mean? Do I want that? Do I not want that? And wrestle with some of these things. And then when you look at that sunset and you go, look at the contrast and the whatever, or look at the way the complementary colors are contrasting each other, and that stuff's just really cool. And so make your own list, and then you go out into life and you're super intentional about looking for those things, and where they don't exist or there's some kind of it's not happening, then maybe you look for ways to maybe remedy that. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's
Well
pretty
then,
cool. So,
no, like this is a great exercise to do actually, because when you were reading all of these, I was like, well, they all seem like great attributes to art. Like I've seen almost all of these adjectives, right? Describing art. Like I've seen that happen in visual arts, in performance arts, but um it's nice to feel like, okay, I get to make a list of what I think is artistically inspiring and beautiful to me. And I think that
mhm,
is such a great exercise to apply to our daily lives, which brings
mhm.
me to my question. How how did you incorporate your artistic side to not even your daily life, but I have to ask a question. As a US Marine,
Oh yeah.
how are you able to how are you able to incorporate something as almost unrestrictive as, art? How are you able to incorporate that in a very restrictive, ruhaha, tough guy mentality
Mm.
space, right? Like what was that experience?
Well, I've got a couple of good Marine stories.
Yay.
I can tell a couple on this show, but uh,
Perfect.
one of the ones that like would probably be most appropriate to like the whole art thing is
Mhm.
on my list, Ezra, of things that I kind of look for when it's right up in front of my brain when I'm creating a piece of artwork, and I'm always trying to do better about thinking about these things outside of the studio as well. But one of the words on my list is unity. I think every piece of art needs to have some kind of unity. So when I was after I'd been in the Marine Corps in my job in what they call the fleet for about a year and a half, I got my specialty was finance. So I got a job in this unit where it was about 3,000 Marines, and we had a budget, and I was the guy that paid for things and bought equipment and sent people traveling, and we would do joint work with the Army, and I would take in these monies and things. And I can tell you that I got there and I couldn't make sense out of anything that was happening. Felt really helpless.
Yeah,
So
I feel like that would be me like in the middle of the ship being like, okay, so what do we do now? Like
because because before
why
that
why
job,
yeah, why did you feel that way?
well, number one, they said, this is not this. I was what you call a first lieutenant, and this job was a job that a captain did. So I wasn't of appropriate rank for the job. So that psyched me out to begin with.
Right.
And then I was coming off another job where I worked with money, but I didn't do that. This was more of a budgeting thing. I was what you call a comptroller in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
new job. And so I didn't know about comptrolling. So the beauty of the Marine Corps is they put you into a job and they're like, do this. And they don't take time to coddle you on the way. This needs to be done. So what was really
Mhm.
cool about that job was um, people might not associate this with the Marine Corps, but the Marine Corps has a lot of room for creative people because
Mm. Yeah,
of
I definitely don't associate Marine with
oh yeah, oh yeah.
creative.
Well,
Wow.
one of the things that happens that we learn from battle is that you can have all these procedures and plans and everything, but things never go according to plan, right?
Yeah.
So once maybe the action begins, then there's this thing called the commander's intent. And they train every Marine rifleman, every Marine who ever joined the Corps is a rifleman first. They train you to understand the commander's intent. And when the plan goes away, that you need to be creative and do whatever's necessary to make that commander's intent a reality. So what was pretty cool was this colonel that I worked for, he wanted to make sure we had enough money to do what we needed to do. And then we didn't have extra money. So my job was to spend all of the money. And that was the commander's intent. And guess what? I got to be really creative about that. And that's what I loved about the Marine Corps. I can remember coming in to and meeting my staff and getting to work. And like I said, having no idea what was going on. It was awful, right? So I recognize now. Here's the thing: I'm looking back on this now, all these years later, because you're allowing me to do this presentation with you, and I wasn't thinking about the artist mindset at that time. I had been an artist. I got some graphic design training in college, and I just kind of, I guess, naturally maybe thought that way. But here was the thing: I didn't understand what was going on, and I was flummoxed by all this. Yet I wasn't afraid to. The Marine Corps had taught me that you get it done. And even when there's no plan, well, of course, I had no plan. So I got to be creative. And like I said before, there's a lot of room for that in the Marine Corps. So I went to work, and I think that command had something like 9 or 10 accounts that we were responsible for. By the time I finished and I made it into something I could understand, it had a lot of unity to it. I think I talked about the word unity being on my list. I had to put it all together in a way that kind of made sense for my brain.
Yeah.
And we ended up with 27 different financial accounts instead of like 9 or 10. So it was a necessary kind of creative process that was taking place. And when we're creating a piece of art, we see something that inspires us, and we're like, boy, that's the essence of what I want to paint. But
Yeah.
like anybody else, that to paint that from a picture isn't creating anything, right? You have to actually take all the elements of what that scene you see is telling you and put them together in a way that makes sense to you. And so that's a kind of cool thing that I hope people can learn to do. Like if you're confused by something, don't be afraid to recreate it like an artist would be apt to do into something that makes sense for you. And while you're at it, keep in mind some of these attributes of beauty, and maybe you'll come out with something good. In that particular instance, I can remember that the anyway, a lot of things came to light that we didn't know about because of this big restructuring. And the good news is it ended up being something that I understood and could manage. So that was really cool. So don't be afraid to create where
And
there's room to create.
I like that you're saying don't be afraid to create. However, I think a lot of people also lack that confidence in themselves. And like confidence, I think I was lied to about the definition of confidence, right? Because when I was a kid, confidence to me was I know everything and I can do it all and I believe in myself, right? Now that I'm a little older and a little bit wiser, I think confidence is more so like believing that you have the tools to help you get through whatever challenge you're facing. And if you don't, you're going to learn. You have the confidence that you will learn whatever you're going to learn, right?
Mhm.
How, like, do you think this was a natural confidence that you've had to like tap into your creative side a little bit more and a lot more in your daily aspects of your living, or was it kind of built because of your experiences with art? And this is a two-parter question. Second part is, how would you encourage people now to build that confidence within themselves, that self-trust of like, I know I'm capable of learning something new, right? Like
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
confidence, that source of confidence.
Right, right. So forget about the end product. The, Forget about the end product. Do what you can to learn. Even a real good artist, even I've read this multiple times. I know I've read it at least twice. That artists that I was told it once, and I read it about another artist another time. These guys who are incredibly talented and well known and making a good living in art, they'll tell you that the really success, they never know whether what they're starting is going to be successful or not. They throw away a lot of work,
Yeah.
and you make a lot of false starts. And um, a guy named Oleg Stavorsky told me one time, he said, I paint one or two good pictures a year. I was shocked. You should see his work.
What
One
was
or
his
two a year. Oleg Stavorsky.
okay.
And so, you know, gosh, when you
Mm-hmm.
OLEGSTAVORSKY or I. I'm not real
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Oleg. Um, yeah, that looks really good. If
Okay.
it might be an I on the end, I'm not real sure about that. Fantastic artist. So, wow, if that's what Oleg is saying, then I start each piece going, well, I don't know about this, but I'm going to give it a shot. And
Right.
experiments hopefully yield some progress at some point. And I don't know, every time you try, you get better. That's all I can say. You can't be so lacking in confidence that you don't give it a shot.
Yeah. I like
And
that.
just realize, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the not focusing on the end product, because I think that's my biggest hurdle too, and that's the thing that stops. Like right now, I'm trying to get into sewing. Like I'm trying to make my own clothes, right? Um, but I still haven't done a project yet because I'm so worried about the end product and like to make it perfect and this. It's just like just do it, like the Nike, like just you gotta just put that first foot forward, like you're saying, right? And then the rest will open up, right? Like that way will open up. And I think I really like that you
Absolutely.
said that you just have to keep trying harder and harder.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I have a couple last questions I want to ask you, but this one I really want to see if we can find a way to explore together as well. How can we incorporate something like I think art is very freeing, right? Art is for
You're
me,
what?
it's art is very freeing.
Mhm.
Like it's a door that anyone can go through to express themselves as they want. Um, but then something that's as like methodical and restrictive and you always have the same answer for the solution, like math or something like engineering. How can those two, what we think are very different things, which in reality I don't think they are, but how can we integrate that, or like can they be integrated, right? Can this logic heavy side integrate with something that's a lot more emotional and psychological? What do you?
Mm. Wow, there's probably a lot that could be said about that. You know, from my point of view, I don't really see them as all that different.
Yeah.
And it's just because of the way I go about painting is kind of methodical. It's kind of like math. That's why I love teaching math.
Mm.
Um, you know, I let me let me see if I understand your question. You're wondering how those two, what they share in terms of
Or can, yeah,
how
like,
they can be integrated.
can they be integrated? Do they share any qualities that are similar? Like, does math have anything to do with art? Does art have anything to do with math? And like you said, like, you use logic for your paintings, you use math for your paintings. How do you, like, what does that look like, for example?
So math and art are a lot alike in that there's a sequential progress towards the solution. You
Mm.
know, and so and there's a lot of basics and a lot of discipline that has to go into building the foundation, up until the point where you can become creative. Like math's a really creative field for the people who have a much better understanding of it than I do. But even in math, there's a lot of creative ways to get to a solution.
Yeah.
And you know, I really am a firm I really believe firmly that fundamentals are something that should be taken very seriously, and we should not teach creativity and art until we have got our fundamentals up to the point where we can use that as a springboard to finally then be creative. Because creativity on its own with no foundation is maybe it could miss the mark of becoming beautiful, because we haven't learned enough about the ways of how to create beauty in a piece of artwork. So, you know, I teach sixth graders to do math, and one of the things that's interesting, when you're working with sixth graders, is they read from left to right. Right, most of them in their culture teaches left to right, and so they logically problem solve that way as well.
Yeah.
So we always work in the beginning of the year on on trying to understand that the flow of math isn't like this way or this way, it's kind of this way. You know, we
Hmm.
start with this and then we're going to do this, and you know, math flows down.
Yeah.
That's a really fundamental thing that's going to definitely benefit them later on when they try to organize their thoughts. It's just a way of organizing your thoughts until you can finally get to where you're getting to the solution. Painting's a lot like that. And underpainting is a way to organize your thoughts, to see if the composition's working, to see what the color relationships and not only the colors but the values, how they're interacting. And you know, when when in, for me, to the point where the painting began to demand certain things that I could recognize, like maybe this is too bright, and now that I put this into it, now this doesn't work. So I got to go back, and it's almost like a dialogue with a painting. You know,
Hmm.
math's a lot like that as well. You know, you try something, and then maybe that doesn't balance on this side, and I just see them both as very sequential, and that's just because that's the way I paint. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of other things that tie them together, like the golden proportion,
Yeah.
and you know, artificial intelligence, which is actually kind of beginning to do some pretty creative things, is just linear algebra, is based on linear algebra. Um, you know, there's lots of, you know, overlap, Fibonacci sequences
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
make beautiful. Yeah,
Like the
I mean,
one,
there's
3, 5, 7 mark.
sure, yeah, and you know, balance. You know, in sixth grade we learned to balance equations.
Mhm.
Balance is also something that is important in art, you know, and so a lot of this terminology is interchangeable. And
Well, I mean, it
So
reminds
I think somebody who's a good mathematician who's sequentially kind of oriented and able to kind of process through steps. That's a good life skill. I think they'd make a good painter because painting, I see it as a series of preparatory steps. And we just don't, how many layers of paint does one of my paintings have on it by the time it's done? A lot, because I've scraped a lot off
yeah,
and I've re-added and it's all a sequence and you just don't put the paint on it and it's done.
yeah.
You got to be comfortable with the sequence and the process. So anyway, I hope that answers your question a little
No,
bit.
that's perfect. That's perfect. I mean, what you mentioned about like fundamentals, it reminds me of like Picasso's journey, right? He started with just fundamental, and then at some point he was like, okay, I'm going to burn it all now. And he like literally created a new art form, which is
Mhm.
insane. Like, I actually also agree with you. Like, I think having that fundamentals is necessary, and hopefully we get to a place where art really is accessible to, or at least fundamentals of art, right? Like those classes are accessible and sustainable and able to actually inspire people to use those fundamentals to for art, but also different aspects of their life.
Mhm.
Before we end our episode, eTalks has three very specific questions that we would like to ask. The first one is, what is your favorite color?
Oh, my favorite color.
Or
Blue,
colors. I don't want to
blue,
live blue. Blue.
blue.
Okay.
You
Um,
bet. You bet.
what are is there a specific shade of blue or like any shade of blue?
Cerulean blue.
Yeah, I was like cerulean.
There you go.
Yeah.
Way to go, Ezra. I,
Um, second question was, what are the three books that you'd recommend to our viewers? And if you don't have books right at the spot, do you have any like songs or podcast shows that you'd recommend?
anything by John Ruskin.
Okay.
Anything by John Ruskin.
This
If
is an author?
assuming this is art. These are art books. These are some foundational art books. The John Ruskin book is I think it's The Fundamentals of Drawing by John Ruskin. Fantastic book. Um, Landscape Painting by Edgar Payne.
Okay.
And John F. Carlson. John F. Carlson. So John F. Carlson wrote a book. I think it's called Landscape Painting.
Mhm.
But Edgar Payne and Edgar Payne and John F. Carlson are full of incredible art theory. They're books that are it's art theory from cover to cover, and it's really a great way for your listeners to get acquainted with some of the things that make art work. And then John Ruskin, he was an author. He's a little bit older than that, but you'll by reading John Ruskin, you'll understand so much about how nature, why nature's beautiful.
Yeah.
Why is a group of three things, why do plants have leaves in groups of three instead of two? And maybe if they have them in groups of two, why do we want to paint them with three? What's special about a group of three?
Yeah.
He talks a lot about patterns and how you can recognize patterns in nature. John Ruskin's book's just fantastic as well. Those three guys, if you read those three books, I guarantee you that you'll have more in ammo than 90% of the people out there in terms of being able to talk and recognize beauty in art.
That's amazing. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my last question for you is, what is a movie that you would recommend to our
Oh,
viewers?
my favorite movie of all time. Does it have to be an art movie?
No, it can be any movie.
Oh, okay. Nacho Libre.
Yeah. Nacho. Yeah.
Nacho. That's such a good movie. Just watch that and have a good time laughing and That's awesome.
I think, well, actually, that's a great movie that you recommend because it's about a man who didn't let go of his childhood dream and he pursued it
Yeah.
using creative problem solutions, right? There we go.
I hadn't thought about that. That could be like one of the reasons I hadn't connected with why I like that so much.
Maybe. Well, I'm a psych major, so I added a little bit of that.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, Terry, thank you so much for giving us a lovely episode. This was very, very helpful. It inspired me a lot. I hope it inspires our viewers. Um, this was I hope we have like a two-parter or a three-parter because I still have a lot more questions and a lot of things that I would love to discuss with you with, especially with your journey on integrating your art experience to your daily life. Thank you so much, Terry. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Let's do it again, Ezra.
Yeah.